It's the 5th day, January 2023. I'm Dana Durnford, also known as the nuclear-proctologist.org. You can call me Gamma Goat if you're in the nuclear industry. And you can call in at 709-589-4406. Hope everybody's having a reasonable day. It's winter where we're to. It's minus 17 wind chill today. Now, I kind of stung quite a bit. We're going to cover Fukushima tanks. We have presentations in our playlist on this. I'm going to try another way of telling that story tonight. It takes me a few seconds to warm up. I have to do everything myself. My apologies. It usually takes 5 people to work this equipment, and they're all on smoke break, I guess. I'm by myself every night doing this shit. So, if you're not familiar with the tanks, you should learn that journalists are trying to convince the entire planet, and they probably have, that they're on top of Reactor 4. The actual Reactor 4 is to your left. So that's a pretty brazen thing to do for all the media worldwide, to pretend they're on top of a building that don't exist. But we're talking about the nuclear industry, so all the rules go out the window. They're harvesting food in this one right alongside of thousands and thousands of 1-ton bags of radiation. They're going to sell it too. And if you're going to look to your media to tell you the truth, you'll snap out of that gullibility soon enough. We got cabinet today. My goodness, there's so much room in that. I got some little videos, pictures at the end of it. But the amount of room in it, I just threw stuff in and tried to fill up the shelves. It was, it took 4 hours. Both knees and a couple of spinal disc. We got her done. Super happy. That is just unbelievably convenient. Okay, so the official story, of course, it's always batshit. The official story is radiation is not going in the ocean, and they're putting it in tanks and they're filtering it, and the only thing coming out is tritium. That's since 2015. That's been the official story. There has been no releases into the ocean, Dana. Okay, so I'm going to show you endless headlines pre-2015 that tells a different story that you better learn about and you better start worrying about. It's time to hold this industry accountable. You are in end times. This is an extinction event. You have to wake up. Wake up. TEPCO to dump, and I'm going to help you. If you watch this whole presentation, you will be extremely informed. We're going to provide you with endless documentation that you're not going to find anywhere else, unfortunately. TEPCO to dump groundwater from Fukushima nuclear plant into the Pacific Ocean, trying to avoid a total collapse of system for handling radioactive water. That's 2013. The AREVA system, the Jiri system, and the ELP system, these are 3 water filtration systems. None of them were working, even in 2014. I'll show you that stuff coming up. So many lies, they can't keep them straight, and that's their downfall. Alarming reality at Fukushima Daiichi, which is the nuclear meltdown, multiple reactors, 8 fuel pools for sure. Plant faced with new crisis, TEPCO is clearly just hanging on day by day. Vast area, 60 million people were contaminated, but nothing got in the ocean. Okay. So the headline today was Japan slammed for reckless decision on release of nuclear contaminated water.
Maybe worse than thought.
So this is a video from 2013 of a German study.
Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
That's 3 years.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German marine research institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
Maybe worse than thought. Studies from last year indicate...
Yeah. In the history of science, we've never seen anything like the Fukushima plume. Heading across the Pacific to US and Canada, why is Japan allowed to get away with contaminating the ocean? Does it sound like it's all in your tanks to you? So it wasn't just the ocean, it was airborne. This model, there's many models of the fallout were based on venting, not the actual meltdown. So make this 600,000 times worse, and then it's actually close to being accurate. At this point on the Fort Payne, where my finger is pointing, it's 468 hours after the meltdown started. That's 19 days. No, it's all in the tanks, Dana. Nothing got out. Nuclear material is flowing into the ocean. That's a pretty good word. The bleeding and leaking words, those people should have their degrees taken away from and be jailed for the rest of their lives. This is an event. We're having an event on our planet. Nuclear material flowing to the ocean, a grave matter. Situation at Fukushima is deplorable. Well, it's just the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language, in paper suits on top of that. Washington Post, it's an environmental disaster. Does that sound like it's in the tanks to anybody? Radioactive activity levels in the ocean hundreds of times above normal. Countries around the Pacific worried about Fukushima leaks. Now, calling it a leak is obviously pro-nuclear stance. Take Japan to court for nuclear water dumping. That was another headline today. The water has already been dumped. They're dumping it all the time. This is a fraction of what's actually happening. 400 tons of highly radioactive water. Highly radioactive water. Look up the dictionary, the word highly for those on the fence. Going into the Pacific each day from Fukushima. Top nuclear regulator, this is a crisis. The tanks were built. Damn it, man, I'm choking up already. My apologies. The tanks were built in 2013, all of them. They were designed to manipulate you so you would think about what's happened, but what might happen. The idea was to cover up what happened. I'm going to show you what actually happened versus what might happen. And you should hopefully come to your senses and call for the execution of all pro-nuclear on the planet. Japan slammed for reckless decision on the release of nuclear contaminated water. Now, so the media is helping Japan, China and South Korea in particular. They know the difference. They got nuclear scientists. They're not naive. The job is to get you fixated on tanks, not on facts. We only deal with facts. And you need to learn the facts or you can't make an informed decision. Government emits water is pouring into the ocean. Highly contaminated. Going on for the last 2 years, since 2013. Officials revealed it may have started just after the nuclear accident. It may have started. I gotta get myself in the right position here. Bear with me. We'll get there. Maybe we won't. We're here. So after the accident, here's what it looked like. Oops, hang on. After the accident, that day started blowing up. This is the buildings. Now, when they talk about the word leak or could be leaking, if you own those buildings and that's what they tell you, I think your building could be leaking and you had no insurance, what would you say? If you're an honest person, not pro-nuclear, but honest. Government admits water is pouring into the ocean. It may have started leaking. It never stopped. It's not leaking, it's hemorrhaging. And the word leaking I find very offensive. No, Dane, it's all in the tanks. Hang on. CNN nuclear expert. Fukushima plant is in uncharted territory. See the word again? Look it up in the dictionary again. Highly radioactive water to be boiled until it evaporates or dumped in the ocean. The word's boiled until it evaporates. You got any idea? Like that makes dirty bombs look like a joke. Even to suggest that that person should have been fired and prosecuted for terrorism. No, it's all in the tanks, Dana. Japan is working now. There's nuclear scientists there, right? No. There's nuclear academics there, Dana, dealing with it all. No. There's nuclear engineers there, Dana. They're dealing with it. No. What are you talking about? This is the nuclear industry. We're talking lethal doses. Japan is working to speed up decommissioning of Fukushima Daiichi. The report details the sad fact that the nuclear scientists are being paid $11 US a day for their efforts. No. The homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants that don't speak the language, are being paid $11 per day for their efforts. Neither one of them, if you ask either one of them, has the nuclear scientists talked to you since you've been here, they'll be like, what are you talking about? There is no such thing as a nuclear scientist. In Fukushima City, over 90,000 homes are eligible for decontamination. In Fukushima City, far, far away. So if your home is eligible for decontamination from radiation, you don't live in that. That's the opposite of what you do as a human. You don't suggest people live in that. That's the opposite of what a human does. This is what the nuclear industry does. It's disgusting. It's not acceptable. And if you let them get away with that, do you think for a second they won't do it to you next? To your loved ones? To everyone? No, Dana, it's all in the tanks, Dana. Not 90,000 houses contaminated. No, it's in the tanks, Dana. Stop lying. Fukushima fallout spiked a year after 3/11. Gee, Dana, I thought it was all over right away. No. It's all in the tanks, Dana. No. Stop saying that. TEPCO emits radioactive waters flowing into the Pacific. Fears of ocean contamination. No, it's all in the tanks, Dana. Stop your fear-mongering. Fukushima plant is hemorrhaging. Look up the word hemorrhaging. Radioactivity. No, it's in the tanks, Dana. Stop your fear-mongering. The scariest part of all is they don't know where it's coming from. No, because there's lethal doses everywhere. And the mystery is, why is it coming out now in 2013 in such a hurry? Well, like in 2013, that's when strontium-90 would have started peaking. It takes about 1,000 days, actually, but as you're getting close to it, it starts peaking. So there's 100 times more strontium-90 for every cesium-137 produced. Strontium-90 is horrific. It gets in all the teeth, all your bones. It destroys the children's stem cells, insects, birds, animals, mammals. You know, nice stuff, right? No, it's in the tanks, Dana. Stop your fear-mongering. Nuclear industry's clean and green, too cheap to meter. TEPCO unable to bring contaminated water issues under control. What? The homeless can't bring it under control? There's parts of the site where the homeless don't have full control, Dana. The tanks were built hastily to hold the highly contaminated water. Not the tritiated, fabled water. The highly contaminated water. What that means is, if you empty the tank and fill it up with clean water, that's going to be highly radioactive water. Once you make something highly radioactive, it's highly radioactive forever, and it's got enough neutrons, it'll make everything else highly radioactive forever. Which led to leaks and related issues. Highly contaminated water. The Advanced Liquid Processing System, ALPS, has yet to function reliably. What year was that? April 21st, 2014. If you filter this stuff, you can't get near the filter within a couple of hours. You got to abandon the site within a couple of days because your filter now is sending off neutron bombardment, burst, gamma shines, and X-rays. No, Dan, it's all in the tank. Twice as much contaminated water entering the ocean from Fukushima as the officials claim. No, it's in the tanks, Dana. Stop it, Dana. 600 tons of groundwater enters the ocean each day at the plant. TEPCO figures, which TEPCO is not supposed to exist. It's the nuclear industry doing it, not TEPCO. All water entering the ocean from the plant is contaminated. They want you to blame TEPCO, see? There's more than enough blame to go around, folks. TEPCO to abandon their REVA system. REVA was another filtration system for France. What's the date on that, Dana? August the 12th, 2014. It's 3.5 years later. Not only does the ALPS system not work, and not only does the Jiri system not work, and a REVA filtration system. For the last 3 years, the system has been unused. So there's no filtration going on. It's going straight into the ocean. No, Dana, it's all in the tanks. EU Energy Commissioner calls Fukushima an apocalypse. France says Japan lost control of the country. And everybody should leave the country from France. Swiss embassy evacuates Tokyo, which is almost 300 kilometers away, actually, apparently. Tokyo's lost all control of events at Fukushima. Energy officials. No, Dana's in the tanks, Dana. Stop the fear-mongering. Nuclear report warns of apocalyptic scenario at Fukushima. An apocalyptic scenario for the planet, folks. This could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. Dana, it's all in the tanks. Dana, nothing got out. Except for potassium. Enormous amounts of contamination flowing from Fukushima. This is why, I've heard that lie so much for the last couple of decades. You got nothing but contempt for everybody in the nuclear industry to perpetrate these crimes against humanity. And they think they're going to get away with it. They're not getting away with it. They're not getting away with it. We've already done the damage to this industry, but this industry needs to be held accountable. We want revenge. We want it publicly, too. Enormous amount of contamination flowing from Fukushima, probably imperil the entire Pacific Ocean. The entire Pacific. No, Dana, it's all in the tanks. Fukushima radioactive tanks may have already been emptied into the Pacific Ocean. You can't fill them up once you empty them. They empty them because you can't get close. You can't build another tank. You can't build another tank. Oh, we got James Lucet in your comment section calling in. Hang on, James. We're almost ready. By the way, thank you. The cabinet is amazing. Go ahead, James.
Great. No, I'll be real brief. I just wanted to echo what you just said about we're not going to let them get away with this. And the first thing that popped in my head, and I called about this a long time ago, but it's worth repeating because it's really shocking. I said, I was in San Diego on business travel and some training in San Diego. And one day after training, we went over to the beach and wanted to check it out and everything, naturally, of course, right?
Yeah.
So drove over there, and I found this really great rock that no one was. It was like all these crazy people jumping off cliffs and things. But I got away from all those people, and I found like this secluded rock that was like kind of protruding to the bay, and it was just so scenic, seeing the ocean, so out there. And I just remember thinking about Fukushima. I didn't know a lot back then, though. Like 2012,
Yeah.
So I was thinking about it, and out of the corner of my eye, this little crab, started walking toward me, and I was like stunned. I'm like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah.
And it had one little claw. It had one little claw up, like it's trying to get my attention. And it got about a foot from me, and it stopped. And I swear, Dana, I just got this weird telepathic
help me
message from this crab. And the crab was like, I'm going to die soon. Don't forget about me. And then it just turned around and walked back where it came from. And it's like, when you say that, you're not going to get away with it this time. It's like that crab was just like, yeah, listen to Dana, that's right,
Yeah,
it's
no
just
kidding,
that
man.
Spirit.
Wow.
It's true. It's just, I just had to share, that's all. So it just came through really strong.
That's great. I'm glad you did, James. Yeah. It's an amazing story. The industry,
All right, you got a big show. Let me let you go.
Okay, my friend. God bless. Thank you. Loves you, bro. Thank you. Yeah, bye-bye. My epiphany, I had one like that. I think it was 2015, and I was up in the middle of nowhere, 27,000 islands. I've been up there for a couple of months, and there's a bunch of seals on the rocks, and I was in the little skiff, the little Zodiac, the 10-footer. And I drove right up to them. I could have reached out and touched them, no problem at all. And because they looked really weird, and I just drifted, and I was snapping pictures, and I was zooming back towards me because I was getting closer, and I kicked the motor out of gear, and I kind of moved forward on my seat because it's a little Zodiac, right? And the seal was just looking at me. It didn't, this is impossible to get that close to us. It wasn't just one seal. There was two seals, and another one was about 10 feet away from them. They had no hair on their body. And I stopped taking pictures, and I went back, and it blew me away. I couldn't continue that low tide. There was nothing in the tidal zones. There was other seals that were in the water, and they were staring at me as I was getting closer and closer. I was waiting for the seal to jump off the rock, and it didn't. It just absolutely stunned me. And then I realized when I was looking at the pictures later that night, I was like, holy smokes, man. And I'm sure there's other people out there will have these epiphanies where they interact with life and they realize it's just there's something had changed, And you got to think about me. I've been out there for a couple of months, and it was overpowering. That's how nature can do things to you. Fukushima radioactive plume will continue to hit shores of U.S. and Canada for many decades. No, Dana, it's in the tanks, Dana. No, it's going to continue to hit the shores of U.S. and Canada for decades. No, it's in the tanks, Dana. Impossible to remove the molten core for hundreds of years, if ever. It's gone, man. That thing is gone into China. That's just a figure of speech, folks. Flow of contamination from the plant will be virtually impossible to stop. No, it's in the tanks, Dana. Stop saying it, Dana. Nothing got in the ocean. When you sit here and talk for a couple of hours each night, that'll happen to you too. This was really weird, this story here. This was the cover picture coming up here, the thumbnail. Nuclear Engineering International. Now, anybody's been around more than once know I despise this pro-nuclear lobbying group. They're in my top 5 shit list. IAEA. Now, this is important, by the way. IAEA released a new report on Fukushima water treatment. I'm already showing you there's no way anything is in the tanks. And not only that the Riva, the Alps, and the Jiri system didn't work. The Jiri system was for the alleged fabled unicorn called cesium-137. It's real, but not on the context that they're trying to perpetrate it. They don't want you to think about uranium and plutonium and americium, curium isotopes, and neptunium and strontium and everything else. They want you to concentrate on cesium. This has been going on for 80 years. They're very disciplined in being scum, trust me. Now, what the IAEA released, now that little tiny picture they got there turned out to be absurd high quality. Remember there quite a few years back when they had built the cover, the fake cover for Reactor 3 and finally moved it to the site and installed it with cranes. They built it off-site. And there was a picture came out that was from the Japanese media, very, very high quality. We were able to zoom in all the way on the reactors, and what it showed us was they had faked everything, and it was undeniable at that stage. Here's some great stuff. The 2 spots that got marked, or circled rather, are, look at the debris on the roofs. See the debris on the roof? That's stunning, folks, because that's a recent picture. Now, the picture to your right is what they claim it looks like in the building to the left, which is Reactor 4. And Reactor 4, with the cover on it, is to the right. This is the stump of Reactor 4. They built this off-site, brought it in, assembled it. Who knows how many homeless died doing that. They put these are panels, and that's it. You can't build a structure there. And the evidence, again, is the fact that they didn't clean up the roofs of those 2 buildings or the pump house, the water house. Not water house. I can't even remember the name of it for some reason. But and so when I was zooming in on it, I was like, don't tell me that's still covered in debris. Yet they claim they're inside the building and everything is perfect. You can see they got the Kevlar sarcophagus taken off of Reactor 1. This is Reactor 2. They're claiming they built this so they can claim they're inside of Reactor 2. You can't get inside of Reactor 2. It liquefied. So did Unit 1. It detonated, and the reactor core, we think, liquefied. Reactor 3 was completely ejected. All the fuel pools, decades of reactor cores from 2 fuel pools, and the reactor core was ejected out of the building. Reactor 4 detonation was something to behold. I'll show you the pictures of it originally. So that's the stump of Reactor 3. It ejected the reactor core and the fuel pool. And Reactor 4, or Reactor 3, and Reactor 4 over there lost everything too. These are almost 40-year-old buildings with decades of reactor cores stored in the top of them. That's gone too. So this picture, when I seen that debris, that is so significant. They couldn't clean that up. See? And what you see on these 2 buildings are just covers to trick you and the entire planet, manipulate you to being complacent. And it was very effective. Why have they got these oil slick type contraptions in the harbor? Is a very interesting question. All these years later, what's that all about? They don't want boats coming in that close to the reactors because you're getting nasty doses. It's okay for the homeless apparently, but not for the other folks. Radiation in Fukushima groundwater skyrockets 3,500 plus times over the weekend. 5 meters from the Pacific Ocean. And what they had done was they had drilled wells over the site and they were taking samples out. Those samples were being tested and put in the tanks. That's what the actual tanks was being used for. In 2015, they flipped it and claimed everything was being put in the tanks. We're going to go back to that in a moment. But these pictures are stunning for detail. It's very, and this was Nuclear Engineering International of all people. Where'd they get their hands on this high quality of a shot? How come I haven't found this shot before? And notice how everything is cemented. That wasn't that way pre-Fukushima. Everything. But what's that up there? The damage up there. We'll go back to that in a second here. There's also debris on the roof down by the seaside they didn't even clean off. And this is right alongside of the common spent fuel pool. This is right behind Reactor 3. Look at the debris on the roof up there and here, and look at the damage to the building. How come they didn't do something with that? And why is everything cemented? Because the fuel rods were buried on the spot, right? The stack is 25 sieverts at the bottom. This is a lethal dose, by the way. So look over in the corner. That's the administration building. It must have thrown a couple of assemblies in there because they didn't repair the windows. Look at that. All these years later, they didn't demolish the building and they didn't cover the building. Which, true fuel rods at least that far, and assemblies, I should say. So there a chain reaction went on inside of the administration building, which was behind Reactor 3 and 4, but elevated. And is that why they haven't tried to do something about that? Don't worry, Dan, everything's in the tanks. If you fill up one of the tanks, and I'll show you the numbers coming up, you're talking about 1.4 million sieverts of just beta. Not counting gammas, alphas, neutrons, and by proxy X-rays. And what that means is, and look how fucking, excuse the language, look how stupid these people always got the same kinds of pictures. It's like a green screen, and I don't know why they would do it, but these tanks are empty, for sure. The tanks, you have major earthquakes there. You can't have all kinds of full tanks there. And I covered that in last night's show, was it, or the night before? Last night, I think it was. Fears are mounted, last night's show or night before. Yeah, the night before. 2 shows back from tonight. Because in March 16th of 2022, they had a massive earthquake just off the Fukushima. And we'll cover more of that starting Monday maybe, right? I got a show ready to go that I got to get done for Sunday night. Because tonight's the last night of the week. Because we took a day off for Christmas and a day off for New Year's, which is really unusual for me. All these years, I got a tendency not to take any time off. We don't have time. I don't have a right to take time off unless I'm sick or something, but I don't have a right to be sick either, so that don't happen very often. National Geographic's fear mounting that Fukushima radiation could lead to dangerous contamination levels in the seafood, and then have the arrogance, the incredible arrogance. National Geographic, what do you expect? At least for now, fish are not glowing, so eat up. But once again, they're acknowledging it's not in the tanks, it's in the ocean, see? TEPCO officials have admitted that groundwater bypass operations are failing to reduce tons of water from entering the crippled reactor buildings at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. again, right, it's not in the tanks, it's in the environment. 250 million liters of Fukushima contaminated water flowing into the Pacific. So 1,000 liters, 250 million, it's 250,000 tons. And that's, if they're 6 feet each, it's 300 miles. So that's 300 miles of 1-ton bags with 1,000 liters in each bag and a lethal dose by the liter, 300 miles long in just a single release. No, it's in the tanks, Dana. TEPCO now dumping contaminated water from the Fukushima plant, Fukushima multiple nuclear reactor meltdowns into the ocean. 200 tons of radioactive groundwater pumped out. Radioactive. This is lethal doses. It'll kill everybody at the subway station if you had a 5-gallon container of it. It'll do that for millions of years. Everybody that walks past it. You put it in the ocean, you're not going to change the lethal isotopes. You're just going to distribute it further to all flora and fauna and all species, to rain clouds and everything else. People in Japan are responsible for poisoning of the world's food chain due to Fukushima. No. It's all in the tanks, Dana. We went there with our paper suits on. And the reason I use the word that denigrate of paper suits is because paper suits can't protect you at a nuclear meltdown at all. And anybody who tells you that is a a-hole. They have to stand up and take action. The buck has to stop somewhere. Yes, it does. It has to stop. We can't continue this way. We can't. We're losing all the species at an accelerated rate. It's untenable. It's time to fight back. You got nothing to lose. Everything to gain. August 25th, 2015. It's in the tanks, Data. Stop lying. TEPCO gets approval to release more Fukushima water into the Pacific. Gets approval. TEPCO ice wall 2014 operation not meeting expectations. No, because you could have built a real wall. Why didn't you build a real wall? And if you have some tricky spots, you can use an ice wall, I suppose, or something else. But why would you build an ice wall instead of a real wall? And the story doesn't ring true, does it? 260,000 people worked on the fabled ice wall, folks. And at the budget that they had, when you divide 260,000 people into that budget, they get $1,100 each if you don't buy any equipment and you don't work. In other words, they're lying on a whole different scale. And there ain't no bottom to the wall. But why would you build a nice wall anyway? Because it's just money they could steal. A lot of it. An attempt to stem the contamination water from flowing into the Pacific. What was the date on that? 2014 June. To stop the water flowing into the Pacific is why they built the ice wall. You know why they built the ice wall? Because it's not in the tanks. It's flowing into the Pacific. Don't worry, I got lots more evidence. I'll win you yet. Seawater is being poisoned at a continuous rate from Fukushima. A source of life on which our lives depend is being corrupted. No, it's in the tanks, Data. TEPCO to abandon the Riva system amid contaminated water crisis. TEPCO to abandon the Riva system that has been unused and kept out of operation. One of the problems will be dismantling and disposing of the contamination system as it become contaminated itself after processing the radioactive material. They can't get near it. And they knew this. They said, build it anyway. It's a public relations stunt. It's not meant to work. Degenerate NBC Nightly News. Urgent situation after frightening discovery at Fukushima. The planned ice wall shows TEPCO is grasping at straws and can't stop the plant leaking like a sleeve. That's NBC, folks. Now almost 900 straight days of contamination flowing into the Pacific. flowing into the Pacific. Not leaking, not bleeding, flowing. The tanks were built, and you see these contraptions they got around the tanks to stop them from shifting because they're empty when they have earthquakes. See? Stop them tipping over. You can't go, look, if you fill up one of these tanks of the kind of radiation, and you'll see the numbers at some point, you'll realize you can't build another tank because you can't get back on the site. You're talking about 1.4 million becquerels of just beta, or sieverts. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. Therefore, the tanks are nowhere wide enough to protect you. You can't step over the hoses. You can't drive over the hoses. It's a lethal dose doing it. Nuclear leak poisons the Pacific. We're talking about the Pacific Ocean. Criticism will be worldwide. No, Dana's in the tanks, Dana. And listen, you know, I'm making this fun of, I'm making fun of that to try to lighten the severity of it, because otherwise I'm going to start cursing and screaming, right? Violent release of material at Fukushima Daiichi. Violent release of materials. No, Dana, it's all in the tanks. Dana, stop your fear-mongering. TEPCO Communications, first off, TEPCO went bankrupt right away, was severed after evacuating critical workers from the plant, which has continued to release radioactive material directly into the atmosphere for the last 21 months. They have abandoned this site over and over and over, by the way. Here's one incident. What you're seeing is an invisible plume that's in the right conditions. You can see it. If you get anywhere in that plume, that's a lethal dose. It's 10 sieverts an hour coming out of the ground in 6 different places. Fukushima reactor site engulfed by steam, something like steam. Work to remove the rubble was suspended. No, you had to run away in terror or you're going to die. This is why nuclear scientists have never went there. This was a lethal dose, and they have had to abandon the sites for weeks at a time. And then when he came back, they had to bring in 16 by 8 foot lead plates and steel plates to lay on the ground so people wouldn't get lethal doses from the emissions that had contaminated the whole site over and over and over. This stuff travels worldwide. It doesn't just stay there. No, it's all in the tanks, Dana. Nothing got out. Writers, cesium remains dispersed throughout the water column from the surface to the ocean floor. The entire ocean, from the surface to the ocean floor. And I played the video from the mainstream media at the beginning, right? Of just that particular model, which is not accurate because it was airborne. It covered the whole planet in 16 days. No, it's all in the tanks, Dana. Authorities on the U.S. West Coast concerned with stunning news from Fukushima. Radioactive water is pouring out every day and headed our way. No, it's in the tanks, Dana. Stop fear-mongering. They don't know where the Fukushima melted cores are, the Wall Street Journal, or in what state. Yes, they do. It's long gone. It's covered the whole planet. It's important to think of the worst-case scenario, really, I'll say. Even greater levels of contamination may be on the way. Strontium peaks after 1,000 days. You know, it's 100 times more strontium for every cesium. And that continues for tens of thousands of days. The plant is built on a river. So anything that gets washed down, because they have a lot of bedrocks and rocks all the way down to the riverbed, they built it up, right? And then the river flows it out into the ocean. So everything they're pouring into the reactors, everything they're spraying is flowing out into the Pacific from the river underneath it, if not directly. And every time it rains, it washes radiation from the entire country. It's truly, we should have sacrificed every nuclear scientist and academic and student on the planet. Because the students are going to grow up to be evil, remember that. Yeah, they might be all cute and innocent right now, but in 4 years' time when they get their degree, they're going to cut your fucking throat, trust me. Oh, we got our paper suits on, everything good. Check. That's the homeless. Go over and stand up there. We need to get a picture. TEPCO admits that the ice wall will not stop groundwater from entering the crippled Fukushima Daiichi reactor. Why would you build something so friggin' monstrous? Why not build a real wall? Official Chinese press, Fukushima contamination is a serious international environmental issue. Crisis concerns the core interest of the people that share the planet. Oh, what about the 8 million species on the planet? Why don't we get their mention once in a while? Why is it I'm the only one that's got to mention that? No, it's all in the tanks, Dana. Nuclear-friendly journalists, a.k.a. scumbag. It's shocking we don't know where the fuel is at any of the 3 reactors. There was 4 reactors. Reactor 4 was offline for some maintenance, but they don't take all the fuel out. That's what maintenance is. They're changing the fuel. But they also might do 6,000 maintenances. Well, they're changing some of the fuel, but they don't change all of the fuel. So that melted down too, see? And why did it blow apart then, if it didn't? It's shocking we don't know where the fuel is at any of the 3 reactors that have melted down at Fukushima. No. It's all in the tanks, Dana. See, it's not in the tanks. In the history of science, we've never seen anything like this Fukushima plume. Why is Japan allowed to get away with contaminating the Pacific? You mean the planet? It contaminated the planet. That airborne model is just 20 days after the earthquake. 16 days after the detonation started. It's a continuous plume. Think of a snowstorm covering the whole planet in 16 days. The snow never melts. Well, now it's radiation, and it destroys everything in increments, sterilizes all the birds and insects and animals and mammals and all the species they're dependent upon. It destroys, you get radioactive pollen, so it destroys all the butterflies and the bees and the moths and everything from the pollen. Thyroids are sensitive for fish. They're extremely sensitive. This is why we see the dearth of fish in the Atlantic and the Pacific happening. No, it's totally all in the tank. All of this is just a coincidence. Everything's in the tank, Dana. No, it doesn't work that way. You can fill up all the tanks from a single reactor in one day normally. Each plant would have normally used, 4,500 tons a minute. 1 million gallons a minute, 1,440 minutes a day, every day. So when you think it melts down, it needs less water. It doesn't need any water. In fact, the amount of water that TEPCO, aka the nuclear industry, claims they're using 150 tons a day, and they're sucking that up, putting it through the filtration system, and then putting it into tanks. That's what they're claiming. Some of it they're claiming is being sprayed back on the reactors. Otherwise, they need more tanks, but they stopped building tanks 2013. That was the cover story, see? Which is equal to a garden hose each day. So in other words, 4 multiple reactors meltdowns. They've been pouring in a garden hose split 4 ways. That's what 150 tons is. Listen, they're going to have to pour in thousands of tons on each melted reactor core each day. That gets washed out into the ocean each day. It's a catastrophic event. And going around claiming you're decontaminating with a pressure washer, and that's obviously not even a good one. You can't decontaminate with a pressure washer. You just spread the radiation everywhere. And everybody stood up around him. Why he's blasting radioactive materials. The homeless don't know any better. Look at this guy with a scrubber. Why, this guy has a pressure washer, and they're calling that decontamination. If you go look pre-Fukushima nuclear cleanup, you'll never see a picture like that, okay? That's a public relation firm who doesn't even know what a reactor is, dreamed that one up. Decontamination efforts in the wake of Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster are facing serious problems, most of which seems to be their own creation because it's the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language. And we got a poll. I forgot to mention tonight. You didn't forget. I got 43 votes. Has Japan already poisoned the entire Pacific Ocean with Fukushima's constant radioactive emissions? Well, it appears so, Dana. There's two of me. Where the hell did the other one come from? I didn't know I had a twin. Decontamination efforts in the wake of Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster are facing serious problems. Most of them seem to be their own creation. And in reality, the decontamination efforts to date have been relatively ineffective. And as some argue, a complete waste of tax funds. That's murder to do that to people, by the way. That's the result from it. Fukushima radiation is still circling the globe. Levels consistently rise and fall in a 40-day cycle. No, it's all in the tanks, Data. I really disrespect those people. Contamination from Fukushima is almost irreversible in the coastal sediments. Gee, that don't sound like it's in the tanks to me. TEPCO went bankrupt right away and were nationalized. They don't even exist. They want you to blame TEPCO instead of the nuclear industry, see? And you should blame the nuclear industry. About high levels of contamination in the groundwater thought to be clean was to be pumped into the ocean as part of a bypass. This was the water coming down behind it. They were going to wall it off, pump the water around it so it didn't go through the building. If the tanks were full, you ain't walking anywhere on the site in the tanks like that, period. That's a lethal dose everywhere. TEPCO gets approval to release more water into the Pacific 2015. The utility hopes to be able to process and dump around 150 of the 300 tons of contaminated water being produced each day. 300 tons is 2 garden hoses a day. That's what 300 tons is. 2 garden hoses, like you use in your garden. And they're going to use 150 of it. You want to dump 150 of it into the ocean each day. They're dumping, dare I say it, at least 1 million tons a day into the Pacific. The reactors need 4,500 tons normally. They're not putting it, there's no evidence they're putting it in tanks. All the evidence says the opposite. How highly contaminated marine snow covered the seafloor at least 2,000 kilometers from Fukushima by July 2011. Covered the seafloor. No, Dana, it's in the tanks, man. A radioactive plume map shows Fukushima contamination is heading towards Hawaii. Oh, here's a. I thought that was a video. That's the ocean plume, but here's NOAA's plume from America. The NOAA, just a cesium and iodine plume based on venting, not based on the actual inventories, the meltdowns, covering the entire planet in 40 days. 40 days versus a year. They're claiming that's a year. It doesn't work that way. The plume covered the entire planet. Therefore, the ocean was covered from the surface to the ocean floor. No, Dana, it was in the tanks. You sure it wasn't in the 30 million one-ton bags you also picked up across your country? 4,000 becquerels cubic meter of cesium detected in the ocean water 30 kilometers from Fukushima coast. Well, you got a even if that was an accurate number, and that's a massive number, by the way, you can't exclude 1,000 other fission products like they done. You want to multiply it by 600 to get close to the right number whenever they give you a number. That's the problem with a nuclear meltdown. And, like, first off, this isn't going to find gamma. Second off, they're wearing paper suits at a nuclear meltdown. Third off, the tanks would be 1.4 million sieverts, and 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. Just walking past it, you'll die somewhere in the next couple of weeks. IAEA, whose standards are based on natural, not man-made anthropogenic radiation. To monitor the radioactive substances 7,000 kilometers from Fukushima in the seas of Sri Lanka. Wait a second, I thought you said it was all in the tanks. Top scientists suggest contaminated water actively being pumped out into the ocean from Fukushima. Gee. Fear-mongering. TEPCO's going to get you for that. Japan to start, this headline was from today. Yesterday. Japan to start discharge of radioactive tritium into the sea. How U.S. nuclear tritium monitoring products, and we covered them a couple of years ago, right? That company will help. First off is not tritium, you despicable, disgusting parasite on our planet. And I already showed an absurd amount of information to quantify that particular assertion. But record radiation levels found in fish at Fukushima Daiichi. 250,000 becquerels per kilogram in a greenling of just gamma, just cesium, by the way. And 3 days later, they captured a spot belly rockfish that had 277,000 becquerels per kilogram. And they captured a greenling fish was found to contain 500,000 becquerels per kilogram of cesium-134, 137. No, Dana. No, it's all in the tanks, Dana. Canadian University. Test seafood for Fukushima contamination. Continuous input for 2 years and counting will lead to ample opportunity for reconcentration up the food chain. Simply not enough is being done on this side of the Pacific. Wait a second, you're trying to tell us it's not in the tanks? The nuclear industry says it's in the tanks. How dare you berate the nuclear scumbag industry? Up to 1 billion becquerels a kilogram of iodine-131 was in the seaweed near Fukushima. That study was 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133, and 31 times more iodine-129 in the same sample. You're talking kilogram, by the way. You multiply it by, you're talking absurd numbers. You're talking absurd numbers. Hello? 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 I guess you don't want to talk. Up to 1 billion becquerels a kilogram of iodine-131. 1 billion. Would have been 64 billion per square meter. And infinitely more than that per cubic meter. These are absurd numbers of just cesium, by the way. The biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod is curium isotopes. And curium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium isotopes. And plutonium, of course, was named after the devil. 1 million becquerels a kilogram in the seaweed. This is not just going to be iodines. No, Dana, it's all in the tanks, honest to goodness. Local LA area paper, radioactive sea spray has been shown to blow hundreds of kilometers inland. Radioactive sea spray. And if you think this is not happening in the Atlantic and the Pacific and other oceans, you are sadly mistaken. You are regrettably mistaken. No, it's totally all in the fucking tanks, Dana. TEPCO to begin coating the seafloor with cement mixtures. They're not trying to retrieve it. They're coating the seafloor. You know what that means? The coating's not going to last jack shit, right? That's a direct input forever into your ocean right there for sure. And we're talking several miles of that coastline, they went out and poured cement over it. There's nothing got in the ocean, Dana. How many times I got to tell you? It's all in the tanks. If you have an earthquake, it's just going to tear that apart. Why would you put your water in something that's going to get... And they have endless... Now, the industry is out of control and has to be held accountable. And it's your job as well as mine. Or we can do it together like we are, I guess. It's time, right, to hold them accountable. Tokyo researchers, radioactive plankton are so heavily contaminated. Radioactive plankton, which all the whales need, and they get leukemia and then they become emaciated, and then we find them. They're so heavily contaminated because they're at the surface, right? Remember that Reuters story where cesium is suspended from the surface to the ocean floor? When you hear cesium, you got to think of there's another 1,000 fission products. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hello? Maybe I haven't got my volume up. I don't know. Yeah, I can hear you. Hello? Hello? Okay, hi. Hang on. Are you calling in for the show? Okay, can I put you live?
Chelsea from Atlanta.
Oh, Chelsea.
This is Chelsea MC from Atlanta.
Hi, Chelsea. SC.
Hey, Dana. So,
What?
Dana,
What's up?
I heard that they're putting all of the radioactive water in these big tanks. And they're building the Olympic Stadium that they had on top of it. In the roadways and the highways, they're building on top of the bags and tanks. Is this true? No, I think they really did build like the Olympic Stadium and all their highways on top of the Fukushima radioactive bags.
They used the dirt, but they were using the water to mix the cement.
Is that why everybody got sick when they went there? It wasn't COVID.
Yeah,
it was
that's right. And
radiation.
And
yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Brings you misery for the rest of your life. They want to build bridges and roads too with the water and mix it with the cement. The maniacs, right?
Sounds lovely.
They're
there's
maniacs.
This company. Oh, it's is it Monsanto that in Idaho they have this quarry that they've been mining, and it turned the entire 2 towns around it radioactive because they were using the slag from it to like build roofs and cements and tiles and skids elementary schools. It's like this 2 towns in Idaho that are completely radioactive now.
Wow.
But not like deadly levels radiation, but like
not
the Geiger counter definitely ticks.
It catches up to you, and children are 100 times more vulnerable, and females are 4 times more health issues than males. And it doesn't mean that the males are going to get off with it. It just means the females are brutally assaulted by radioactive materials.
Everything that's organic is.
Right.
It's ridiculous that they're trying to harness this kind of crazy, like...
Yeah.
The whole concept is just kind of insane. But I think that they might be psychopaths, and we're living in an insane asylum, actually.
Hey! You won first prize. Congratulations. First prize is
thank you.
First prize is 5 buckets of horse shit, and you got to bring your own lids.
Oh, great. I'll take that and give it back to you because it's probably radioactive.
No, it's your excrement is radioactive. They can't get rid of the sewage in Japan. It's too radioactive. They can't get rid of the sediment from the water reclamation facilities. It's too radioactive. They can't get rid of the ash from the incinerators.
All of their textiles and all of their, like, they're exporting all their textiles and stuff like crazy still.
Yeah.
That's radioactive.
They're exporting double what they did pre-Fukushima.
I know. I bought some radioactive kimonos from Osaka. I bought
Yep,
it from an
Osa-
auction on eBay, and they came back and they were clicking away on the mirror.
Wow.
I had to. Yeah, and I gave them to all my friends, and they gave them to their mothers for Christmas. It was horrible.
Wow.
What I should have done was call the local radio station and get some publicity on that, and have the whole hazmat crew come up. I didn't feel like losing my house, but I really should have done that, actually.
Yeah, that would have worked,
I really
right?
Give a fuck about the planet.
That's right, though. No, that would have worked.
been-
That would have workked. That actually would have
That would
worked.
have
Yeah.
totally worked.
Yeah.
No, I can't believe it. I should have done it, but they're going to come in and take down my whole house and quarantine it up. But still, I don't care. I don't need the house and all this stuff in it that much. I should do that. I should have done that. I feel bad about it.
You go, girl.
The kids who gave
Kick some ass.
mother a kimono that was radioactive.
That's an amazing story, by the way. Thank you.
Anybody can be open to that idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're still exporting things from Japan, but yeah, I think Japan has actually lost most of their population, if there's anybody left in there, because I've seen a lot of YouTube videos from people who are very young, like just traveling through Japan, and all the cities are empty and they're brand new.
They do. They have an epidemic of houses that are empty.
Gone.
They're paying people now $6,000 to move out of
They're giving
Tokyo.
away free houses.
And they've been doing that for
All
the
the
last couple of
abandoned
years.
houses.
I've covered it at least that I know about in the last couple of years. You're right 100% again. Keep going. You're doing awesome, by the way.
Oh, I'm good. I'm going to leave it for you now.
That's
I like
fantastic.
How you're but I heard they were in the tanks. It was in the tanks, but yeah. All right. Well, hope you're doing well, and you can make it through this crazy year with some progress in the right direction, because the planet needs a healing. Time for the divine feminine energy.
Yeah,
to
100%.
spin and rule, because the men, let's look at it, face it, guys, your track record sucks.
Yeah.
I'm serious. Give the women a chance. See if we can do better. Hey, give us a chance, because I don't think we'll be doing this.
I think that's the winning combination, if you ask me. Okay, Chelsea, thank you for calling in. Appreciate it.
Bye, Dana.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Hugs for you, honey. Have a nice night. And that was a great call. Thank you, caller. That's Chelsea SC. You see her in the comments sometimes. And take no shit. Take no prisoners. Wow. Kick ass. Come on, bring it on. Got me rejuvenated now. I want to go kick somebody's ass from the nuclear industry. I can't. They're all in the tanks, Dana. Groundwater is a likely source for continued flow of radiation into the ocean. Complete melt-through. No, Dana. No, it's in the tanks, Dana. Stop your fear-mongering. China knows better. China's not naive. China's helping perpetrate the scam on the tanks, and so is South Korea. Japan urged to take calls from international community seriously over its dumping of... No, they're trying to raise resistance so they can drown out people like me and you. That's all that's about. TEPCO emits contaminated water leaking. Like, what's really interesting about this picture? These pits full of highly radioactive water is interesting because they're not very thick and people are walking on it. And you can't walk on something like that. That's a lethal dose, even being close to it. 100 feet away is a lethal dose. These are not thick enough to protect you. From the numbers, they stopped talking about that after the first little while, interestingly. 6,000 becquerels per cubic centimeter. No. They're up walking on it, Dana. No, they're not. That's the scam. It's the same as the tanks. They needed a way to manipulate you, and that's what they went for. Fuel rod materials may be released when the acid seawater interacted with the ruptured. When they rupture, because there was no water covering them, see? So the zirconium cladding catches fire. It burns at around 1800 degrees. That ignites the uranium plutonium pellets. They burn at 9,000 degrees. When that hits 5%, there's no off switches. I don't know if there actually ever was, but At 5% for sure, there's no off switch. It's burning now, and the water at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures is going to just disappear. So now the entire reactor core is going to liquefy, or it's going to just atomize an aerosol in pure uranium, pure plutonium environment. What we're seeing happen is it consumes the steel and rebar and the cement and the rods and everything, the steel rods in the pools. And then it goes through the building, consumes everything, atomizes aerosols, it ionizes, radiates it, and it'll do that perpetual. It's a perpetual disease factory for millions of years. No, Dana, it's all in the tanks, Dana. We're the nuclear industry. The homeless got it under control, Dana. NHK finds radioactive silver in the abalone liver at 1,800 becquerels a kilogram. It's not just going to be silver. And that's a terrible number, by the way. Radiation unexpectedly transported south towards TEPCO. Gee, Dana, you sure it's not in the tanks? Yeah, I'm sure. Researchers found cesium-137 over 50 million times normal. 50 million times normal. Yeah. But we put it in the tank, Dana. I'm really sick of these tanks, and I had to come out and bash them. I apologize for not being a slave. Sickened Alaska seals concentrated where Fukushima radioactive plume made landfall. Well, in Alaska, it had ice at that time when the plume landed. When the ice melted, was another massive pulse. And that shocked, that wiped out the species, the migratory birds, the Cassini auklets, the common murres, the migratory birds were dependent upon, right? There was nothing on the coastlines. We went up and done the investigation on that for 6 years or more. TEPCO begins critical, took 250,000 pictures, which apparently is a crime. TEPCO begins critical work on loading Fukushima Daiichi Unit 4 spent fuel pool, November 18, 2013. So they're claiming this is Fukushima Reactor 4 fuel pool. Sure it is, Dana. So let's compare it. Does it look like this, or does it actually look like that over there? It looks like that over there. And the fact that it looks like that over there means it ain't in the tanks anymore. So they're claiming there's only 1,533 assemblies. What was interesting, because America has 70 plus plants just like that. So they could have shot this in America. And then why in the bottom left-hand corner was it pixelated? Why was it up in the top center pixelated? And why was it in the top left-hand side pixelated? What did they have to hide if they got nothing to hide? What are you hiding? It's the most dangerous nuclear operation in human history. Oh yeah, totally looks like it to me. Each spent fuel assembly is made up of 100 fuel rods, not 80. They're 12 feet long and 18 pounds each, which by assembly can contain up to 75 trillion becquerels of radioactivity. First off, let me do the math for you so you can understand how big that fucking lie actually is. Excuse the language again. That's it, boy. The last show of the week kind of goes down the... Let me explain to you, though, what they're talking about. 75 trillion becquerels of radioactivity. Well, wait now. Let me bring in some documentation so you can wrap your mind around it, hopefully. Just bear with me. Bear with me. It goes there. Oh, it goes over here. Hang on. This is actually super important. Let me finish this out first. Around 1% by weight is plutonium. So 1,440 fuel rods. Hang on. I can't answer your phone call. Hello?
Hello, Mr. Diner.
Hard case, eh? I'll get them next time. That's a Tokyo monster stalker. So 1,440 fuel rods, 1% plutonium by weight, is 14.4, is 18,800 pounds of plutonium just in Reactor 4 that they acknowledge. Underground cesium near Fukushima reactor increases the deeper the sample gets. Other locations tested have higher. No, it's all in the tanks, Dana. Mr. Dana, it's all in the tanks, Mr. Dana. Nuclear expert, Fukushima melted fuels drifting into the ocean and onto the land. Fukushima is drifting into the ocean and onto the land. There we go. Put it into that. Fukushima is drifting into the ocean and onto the land. Lacking containment because it's in the ocean, is picked up by tens of thousands of miles of rain clouds each day and brought into the coastlines too. They hit the Rocky Mountains, the Cascades, the high altitude coastlines, and they'll lose a lot of their payloads, and then they'll get over the mountain. So it's very destructive. It's a perfect extinction event machine. It ends up in the coastline, blows in the community. People get an exceptional dose. And it'll go on for thousands, if not tens of thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of years, till it wipes out every species. No, Dana, it's all in the tanks. Regulator urges TEPCO to dump tritiated water into the Pacific Ocean. 2013, and remember, I showed you in 2014, the Riva filtration system had never worked, and neither did the ALPS. And now they're talking about tritium. There's a few people out there who wouldn't mind pulling their head off, right off their shoulders. They're seemingly just as unable to prevent the eventual releases of tritium water into the ocean as they are able to prevent the daily outflow of extremely radioactive material. No. It's all in the tanks, Dana. It's all in those tanks. Experts fear giant underground reservoir of extremely contaminated. Extremely is a whole... doesn't do it justice, by the way. And it did enter the Pacific because it was built on a river. They built it up 100 feet up. And so everything went down, hits the water table, water washes it out into the ocean. If the fuel goes down there, it basically just burns down, the water keeps going in there, and it washes out into the ocean. It might burn for millenniums. No, it's all in the tanks. Nuclear expert, Fukushima explosion could have actually blown holes through the containment vessels. Gee, I don't know. Let's have a look. Did it blow any holes through the containment vessels, Dana? Gee, it's hard to see. The containment vessels are not there no more. I get a little cranky sometimes, but I usually rein it in pretty quick. Fukushima Prefecture requests Japanese government remove TEPCO from management, because TEPCO, of course, didn't exist. It was nationalized, right? And the government took over. Why would you put a company that's not a decommissioning authority with any... Why wouldn't you bring in a company that built it? Why would you do that? Why would you leave the most people that are... You know what I'm saying? It was so you blame TEPCO instead of the real monsters, the nuclear industry, the nuclear academics, the nuclear scientists. It is no secret Tokyo Electric is incapable of containing the disaster at Fukushima Daiichi. It is no secret. And then this ridiculous picture here where they got IAEA taped onto their back in a paper suit. It's absurd. Are they really that insecure they got to have the words IAEA on their back? No, that's homeless who don't read English. So they can get some pictures. The IAEA is not going standing up right there in paper suits, I can assure you. They're not stupid, they're evil. There's a difference, right? Japanese government to fund underground wall at Fukushima Daiichi is more criminal charges filed against TEPCO instead of the nuclear industry or the company that built it. No. It's all in the tanks, Dana. Traditionally, frozen walls would normally been installed and used for a couple of years in a very small way. Never, like they done that because they didn't have to pay for it, and they weren't going to do it anyway, so they can steal the money. Additionally, the underground wall will not be ready for at least 2 years, and in the meantime, the contaminated water will continue. When you say the word leak out, you just want to find them and kick the shit out of them. The utilities estimated 1,000 tons of groundwater rushes into the complex every day. 1,000 tons. Like the reactors need 4,500 tons a minute normally, each of them. Special report, plutonium levels suggest the fuel rods were shattered. There was 18,000 pounds of plutonium per reactor fuel pool. There's 2 fuel pools in each building. There's 8 of them in the 4 buildings. All 8 of them were completely lost. The significance to all the species on the planet is catastrophic. It's catastrophic. No, it's all in the tanks, Dana. Dump all the Fukushima nuclear waste into the Pacific. No risk to the United States. They have to make... This is the New Scientist. And we've done entire presentations on studies from New Scientists. It's revolting. They actually don't have a right to breathe the same air as us. All of them should be on death row for what they've done to our planet. No, it's totally all in the tanks. We're talking about generations being affected by Fukushima. What do we tell the younger generation? I can look them in the eye and say, I went to war every day so you can have a future. I went to war every single day. There wasn't a day I didn't go to war for you. I can look anybody in the eye. I can guarantee you that. And so can you that supported me. Because you would have had the like mind. You would have done it if you could. Fukushima chief calls out, Mayday, Mayday, when reactor number 3 exploded. Exploded! Let's have a look at that. Reactor number 3 is this one right here. I'll put it on the big screen for you. Number 3 is to the right. Does that look like it exploded? I can't tell the difference. I've been lied to for so long. No, it's totally all in the tanks. Look at all the people in the paper suit. It's got to be in the tanks. They wouldn't be stood up there, Dana, doing nothing. Getting their pictures taken. How many? Bring another 50, Fukushima 50 in. They're about to die. Lead scientist surprised by Japan's data. Fukushima plant is still leaking. Leaking. Like, every time I heard the word leaking, I got all I can do not to freak. This is leaking. This is 16 days of leaking. This is a model by France based on venting, not even based on the nuclear meltdowns or the fuel pools, or multiple ones on top of that. This is 16 days later, the whole planet covered in radioactive fallout. That look like it's fucking leaking to anybody? If it leaks, you die, by the way. How about that one? Does that look like it's leaking to you? Now, inside that container, there's magic. It looks like that, Dana. Well, no way. You're kidding me, right? No, I swear on Oppenheimer's grave. It looks just like that. They didn't even clean the debris off those roofs down there. See that? Or see it behind it? But they're inside of it. Everything is A-OK. Yeah. We need... This needs to end. This has gone on too long. It's not acceptable. We have to... And I like the idea, like, and women could break through the maze. I'm not going to break through because I'm gone to war. Women can do it because they got subtlety, they got finesse. I don't have that anymore. I have anger issues. To put it bluntly. I'm so relieved that octopuses from Fukushima have finally become available. Prices are 20% higher than usual. That's because all the water's in the tank, Dana. The little demons. Japan must work with the Pacific to find a solution to the Fukushima water releases issues. Otherwise, we face a disaster. Like when you pretend it's in the tanks, that means you're pretending. Used to cool down the melted fuel. A liter that can exterminate everybody in a supermarket every 20 minutes forever. The discussion, all you do is stand it there. Anybody walks past it is dead. Everybody in the building is dead. We have uncovered serious information gaps and grave concerns with proposed ocean releases. Really, have you? Did it ever occur to you it's not in the tanks? That's the idea, is to build up all these useful idiots that will join into the barrage and drown out the truth. And they're winning, and it's time to stop it. We're in desperation mode, folks. Leak of the contaminated water of Fukushima Daiichi Unit 3 may have international safety impacts. At Daiichi 3 only, which was mixed oxide fuel. So it's a legitimate concern. Discovered a stream of water, not a leak, not bleeding, but a stream of water nearly a foot wide flowing through the first floor of the reactor building into the drain of the floor. First off, you can't get in the building. You can't get near the building. After investigation found that the water contained levels of radioactive material equal to highly contaminated water, which is accumulating in the basement. Nothing is accumulated in the basement. The earth was cracked, the basements were cracked wide open by the earthquake, for goodness sakes, and the detonations. Investigation revealed 24 million becquerels per liter of beta ray, which includes strontium, 700,000 becquerels per liter of cesium. So it's very hard to see cesium show up when you get that high number of strontium. But it's impossible when you got that high number of cesium-134, that high number, 24 million becquerels per liter of strontium and cesiums, and claim that you can now find 1.7 million becquerels per liter of cesium. I'm sorry, I thought they were going to mention tritium. I got a little ahead of myself on the stories that time. So these are shocking numbers. If we wouldn't dump it on our land, why should we dump it in our ocean? Well, because only the homeless are there. They don't know any better. 1.7 million becquerels a liter. The whole story has so many endless holes into it, and the whole plan is out there talking about tanks that don't even have radiation in it, because you can't build another tank alongside of it if he does that. If cargo, and I'll show you why coming up, if cargo ships at sea are found to be deliberately dumping waste overboard, they're banned from doing business in many international markets. Yeah, everybody should turn on Japan immediately, sustainably. Don't eat food from Japan, for goodness sakes. It seems that the people that promote it are so evil, I don't even think they realize that they're supposed to be humans. It seems that the continuous batch releases of contaminated water become standard operating procedures at Fukushima as long as the Japanese government and the nuclear industry is allowed to remain in control. The Japanese government and nuclear industry is not a decommissioning, decontamination organization. Government test finds plutonium in the fish caught off the Japan's coast. No. It was all in the tank. A total lie. USGS issues announcements about polar bears with oozing sores, hair losses in Alaska. Government testing for radiation. 3 of 4 captured yesterday were affected, and similar symptoms as recent mystery seals deaths. We've seen almost catastrophic events of both species. So this is obviously the homeless, you know. You're there in a paper suit. You're in a highly radioactive environment, doing nothing to get your picture taken, and you'll always see them with their plastic bag in their hand. That's TEPCO gift cards probably, or something like that. 8 months later, plutonium test results still pending. Researcher compares Fukushima radiation to potassium. Like anybody that compares anthropogenic man-made radiation to potassium is subhuman. They're serial killers. They're the worst of the worst that human has produced. You know, it really says that we live in a terrible society when anybody would even perpetrate it, let alone media publish it. These are containers of radioactive waste that they're storing on site, they claim. Scientists surprised by high levels of radioactive silver in fish off the Japanese coast. No, nobody's surprised. Only an idiot would be surprised in a scientific world. TEPCO failed to deliver on the promise to install a fence to restrict the contamination from leaking into the Pacific Ocean. 2.5 years later, and they now admitted that the TEPCO's promised to build a fence to block the water from leaking from the plant, which is impossible. It can't be done. You can't build something to stop the radiation, filter the radiation. And did not ever actually install the fence. They claimed, well, it was going to cost $1 billion, and that's why we didn't do it. No, you can't do it. Because you cause liquefaction all over the site. And the radiation now makes the site, you can't get on the site again. At the time, TEPCO asked the government not to announce they are committed to constructing it. No, you can't stop the radiation from entering the ocean because it'll come up through the ground, and it did in the few places where they wanted to do it, which was the reason that they couldn't build a pump around or the ice wall to get it to be effective because of the liquefaction. So what they done was they unfroze, it never really worked 100%. It has no bottom in it, right? And so it's eventually just going to drain down into the old riverbed underneath it and get washed out into the ocean. And China syndrome inevitable, says architect of reactor number 3, Fukushima, warns of massive hydrovolcanic explosions. No, it's totally in the tanks, Dana. Now we covered, let me see if I can find it for you, what they're referring to, because that happens. And what he's talking about is it goes down and hits the water table, and because water expands so dramatically, I'm in the wrong one, about 1,200 cubic feet a liter. Let me see if I can find that. We covered that last night, but the story is, we covered pictures of it earlier where the whole site is buried under steam. But if you haven't seen it before, it's worded. Let me hang on and see if I can find it. I don't always find it when I'm looking for it. Pretty rare for me not to get it. It's usually time constraints, and I won't, if I don't find it right away, I'll usually move on, right? But it's such an important facet. Let me see if I can. If I preload, normally all this is preloaded. I know where to find it. And last night I found it right away, but not tonight. I'm really bad at giving up. I'm a sore loser. I'll do the extra work rather than give up. And quit. I've never quit a job in my life. Here we go. Got lucky. So, warns of massive hydrovolcanic explosions.
Fukushima plants say the ground under the facility is cracking and radioactive steam is escaping through the cracks. The cooling system at the plant failed after the devastating tsunami hit Japan in March, sparking a nuclear crisis. But new evidence suggests that Fukushima reactors were doomed to cripple even before the massive wave reached them. Joining me now via broad.
Okay, so in 6 places, the steam, that's a video to your right. It's at 40 times the normal speed. These are lethal doses. You can't walk through it or go near it. You can't be within 1,000 feet of it. It's a lethal dose. 10 sieverts an hour at 6 places. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. But what that means, you're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of sieverts. By the way, the Geiger counters, the stationary Geiger counters that they're referring to for those measurements, their maximum was 10 sieverts. No, totally all in the tanks. Strictly, everything is in the tanks, Dana. In Japan, at times there could be hot spots under the sea. We showed you where the cemented several miles of the coastline underwater. So that's the official picture, but the building doesn't actually exist. Does that look like a 190-foot building to anybody? Is there anybody out there thinks that's 190 feet? Based on our experience with nuclear contamination, continuing with ocean discharge plans is simply inconceivable. Well, like, again, that's headlines from the last couple of days where they're claiming, they're trying to get everybody yelling about tanks when the damage is catastrophic already worldwide. And they want you to think about what might happen, not what has happened. That's what we're trying to articulate here tonight. Government refused to provide funds to research Fukushima. Virtually zero monitoring. I went out and done research expeditions for 6 years. I'm still seasick from that. 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean without coming home. It was a brutal, brutal experience. Terrifying sometimes, horrifying others. Always torturous, always stressed, always... and the reason I'd done long trips was because I was afraid I might not get another chance. And so I had no choice but to suffer it out. Sometimes I end up stuck in nowhere with no fuel, no food, waiting, and then you have to bum food until your pension came in to get back out there. Because what was not all the time, but sometimes you had to do that. Contaminated vehicles, I wouldn't come home. I wouldn't give up until I'd done the whole coastline. And then we brought the documentation back and shared it with everybody. You can find a lot of it up at my website, nuclearproctologist.org. Contaminated vehicles from Japan still being rejected by Russia. Contaminated vehicles from Japan still being rejected by Jamaica. No, it's all in the tanks, Dana. Radiation tests underway on dead and diseased seals in Alaska, suffering bleeding lesions, hair loss, seizures, organ failures, lesions on all their organs, heart attacks, cancers. TEPCO, there's 1,800 illnesses, by the way, and diseases, and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries, illnesses, not just cancer. The industry at times long gone. It's time to fight back. You got no choice. TEPCO submits criteria to the Nuclear Non-Regulatory Authority to dump the contaminated water into the ocean 2013. No. It's totally in the tanks, Dana. Tokyo Electric determines human error causes a contamination leak. Whenever they say the word leak, it enrages me. Their leak was at 240 million becquerels per liter of beta ray. That's not a leak. That's the biggest dirty bomb imaginable. 240 million becquerels. They're only acknowledging beta because it's so strong they can't find anything else despite the fact it's there. There's one of the stupider pictures I'll probably ever see. Per liter, 240 million becquerels of just beta. What about the alphas, the neutrons, the gammas? Could less radiation in food make public feel unsafe? That's a mockery, see? What a horrific thing to say, folks. Like, the nuclear industry absolutely despises all species, but that's the only emotion it has is hate. It doesn't have any other emotions. The pro-nuclear scientists, the nuclear academics, they don't have normal emotions like me and you. Japan lawmaker, plutonium certainly went deep within the basement of reactor number 3. Deep in reactor 3. It didn't go in reactor 3. It went straight up in the air a couple of miles. It detonated. It's reactor 3. forgot to lower that volume, man. That gets me sometimes. Frightens the shit out of me when it does it. There you go. I just changed the volume so that don't happen again. Silver 110 detected in marine life. China researchers. All water samples contain strontium 90. Oh no, totally in the tanks, Dana. All 21 samples of fish caught 50 kilometers exceeded the maximum cesium levels. And cesium, of course, is just one of 1,000 fission products that are going to be in the same fish. No, they're totally all in the tank, Dana. Canada suspends mobile radiation measurements around Vancouver, British Columbia, until further notice. They actually moved them into the Okanagan Valley, way inland, and didn't turn them on for a month. Elementary school in Japan uses water bottles to shield the students. Think about this one here. This is Koriyama City. An elementary school in Koriyama City, which is located in Fukushima Prefecture, some 34 miles west at a Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster genocide machine, 34 miles away. They're using water bottles to shield the radiation from the courtyards around areas around the school buildings. The bottles are filled with water, placed inside of square boxes that are stacked around the classroom. So this is the actual picture where they place these water bottles around the classroom so the students don't get too big of a dose instead of moving them out of there. We see this, all kinds of examples of this with the nuclear industry. According to the school, it seems to reduce the radiation levels inside by 1/3. That's a horror story, see? That they didn't move the victims out. They've done everything they could to poison everybody. That's what they've been doing. They grow 1 billion pounds of food in the exclusion zone each year and ship it worldwide, for goodness sakes. And they've doubled. In Koriyama City, see those numbers that road has highlighted? Average disposition density of cesium on the soil. This was unclear. UN scumbags. See all the communities to your left? 162,000 per square meter in Koriyama City, every square meter, of just cesium. They're not checking for all the other fission products that are going to be there. Like none of these towns, you see the population in that second row, the name of the community in the first row, the second row is the populations, the number of people, and the third row is the cesium, gamma, becquerels per square meter. Like these kind of numbers means it's completely airborne. You can't avoid breathing it, consuming it, drinking it, the bioaccumulation of it. And that's going to be 11 becquerels a kilogram is permanent lesions on the organs of children. 50 becquerels is permanent lesions for adults, by the way. Corrosional current could rapidly carry the radioactive into the interior of the Pacific Ocean. Gee, I thought it was all in tanks. Okay, so this is the new IAEA report that came out last week. And they detail IAEA independent checks of treated water discharge from Fukushima. The task force. Now, these are criminals. These people should be charged with crimes against humanity a long time ago, 80 years ago. Established review the safety of Japan's plan to discharge the ELP, Advanced Liquid Processing System, that I showed you multiple times earlier in 2014 didn't work at all. Therefore, it doesn't work today. It's a total scam. Released its third report. So they had a PDF. And who are they sponsored by? The Australian government. Like we cover Australia a lot. They're absurd scumbags in the nuclear industry in the United Kingdom and Australia. America is pretty bad, but nothing like United Kingdom and nothing like Australia. They're absolutely terrorists. And New Zealand. United States non-regulatory agencies and Department of State and CNSC. These are notorious genocide machines. Consistent with the relevant IAEA safety standard, they kept raising their standards till there's nothing safe. It's required to TEPCO, not the NRC, not the nuclear regulatory agencies, not the universities, but a corporation known as TEPCO, is required to determine the characteristics, the isotopes, and the activity of the ALPS treated water. Not IAEA. In their own press release, folks. And to establish and implement monitoring programs is TEPCO, to ensure the public exposure due to the discharges is adequately assessed, is left up to a corporation, not a regulatory agency. That's symmetrical worldwide. There's no Congress, there's no parliaments worldwide have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with radiation. And that's why they're poisoning you, because it's not illegal to do it to you. It's a harsh reality. The chosen operational perimeters for discharge include an annual limit of 22 trillion becquerels of tritium, 3H, and a concentration limit of 1,500 becquerels a liter of tritium in the discharges. So the fact that they use the words tritium discredits them immediately. You can't be left with just tritium. You can't filter radioactive water. It's absurd to suggest you could. But it gets worse. TEPCO has the sole responsibility for source monitoring at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plants. It's TEPCO. That don't even exist. It was bankrupt right away and nationalized by the Japanese government because it was on the stock markets. So how come the non-regulatory, nuclear regulatory agencies, the IAEA, doesn't have the responsibility? Because nobody, there is no checks and balances. And you got to be the checks and balances. And if you don't do it, then you can kiss this planet goodbye. I'm fighting all day, every day, trying to educate the population to build a resistance, and it didn't happen. But at the same time, the policymakers, the investors would have found me, and would have went, whoa, we're walking. All environmental monitoring related to the nuclear event at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant is conducted according to the Comprehensive Radiation Monitoring Plan. TEPCO and other relevant Japanese authorities have the responsibility under the CRMP. Again, TEPCO being the key word, a fictional organization that was taken over, swallowed up by the government in 2011 because it was beyond their... Like, why would you have a major event and use a fictional corporation that is not a decommissioned authority, leave them in charge? The appearance of being in charge. So you don't blame the nuclear industry worldwide, which is responsible, which didn't... You know what? They closed 54 nuclear power plants in Japan. Not one person from those plants volunteered to go to Fukushima. Nor did we have a single volunteer from any other nuclear power plant worldwide go to Fukushima. Nor no academics, nor no scientists, nor none. That should terrify, absolutely, unequivocally terrify the living daylights out of every human in history. IAEA considers that it's necessary to promote confidence in TEPCO source monitoring. Common radionuclides, 60 cobalt, 90 strontium, 106 rubidium, 125 selenium, 129 iodine, 134 cesium, 137 cesium, tritium 3H, 14 carbon, and 99 technetium 99. Technetium 99, rather. In the tanks, this is what they're going to be sampling, were collected, have been published by TEPCO, not a independent, non-regulatory, controlled opposition. So here's the numbers that's going to be considered acceptable by the liter. Right? Discharge, becquerels a liter, 60,000 for tritium, carbon-14 with a 5,700-year half-life, 57,000-year life, 2,000 becquerels a liter, 54, what is it? Mortarium, I can't remember. 1,000 becquerels a liter, 60 cobalt, 200 becquerels a liter, nickel, 60 radioactive nickel, 6,000 becquerels a liter. Selenium 90 or 79 has a 356,000 year half-life. They got that at 200 becquerels a liter, folks. Strontium 90, they only got it at 30 becquerels a liter. For every cesium, is going to be 100 strontium 90 with the concoctions they were using for fuel. Technetium with a 210,000 year half-life and 1,000 becquerels per liter. Rubidium at 100 becquerels per liter. And these decay, the short ones will decay to a harmful isotope, see? When you see because there's lots they're not putting there, because these things are still in chain reaction modes. They're still producing a lot of short half-life isotopes that are not included. $129 iodine with 160 million year half-life. We had 220 million atoms per liter sustained in Ottawa study in Canada. This saturates the thyroid glands of all the insects and birds and fish and animals and mammals and babies and children and humans. And we're all producing radioactive hormones. All of us. Every species out there too. But children and females are the most vulnerable. We have to protect them at all costs. We have to. We have to get the courage. We have to get the guts. This is the moral and ethical path, you know. How can anybody ignore this kind of responsibility? At a becquerels per liter, 60,000, 6,000. And I just kind of walked you through that. They even got 238 uranium there, 4.4 billion year half-life. So the total discharges of all the isotopes is 85,000 becquerels a liter. 85,000. And it's a cocktail of evil is what you're talking about. Plutonium-239, they're claiming at only 4 becquerels. Plutonium-240, they're claiming at only 4 becquerels. And look at the curium isotopes, right? 243, 244 curium, these are super important isotopes. But the curium isotope is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods. And I don't see americium there. I see neptunium, but they only got 9 becquerels. Now, I mean, the plumes of neptunium were stunning. So the IAEA, the betrayal of the IAEA, every human on this planet at some point will spit every time they hear their name. That's a fact. And these people need to be held accountable. That's all of them in the one picture right there that they're going to be releasing. I screwed up that picture, did I? It may look better on this one. Yeah. Oh. There you go. So 85,000, I think it was. And there's the spots where they're getting the numbers from, they're claiming. Off Fukushima coastline. First off, we've had an event. Another nuke plant, Fukushima Daini, had 3,000 tons of radioactive water in the reactor buildings. And how did it get that much water in the radioactive buildings without having an event, I wonder? No, totally all in the tanks, Dana. Japan detects extraordinary high levels of radioactivity off Sendai. I thought you said it was all in the tanks there, Tokyo. High-level radiation found over 300 kilometers stretch off Fukushima. Reconcentrations of radioactive substances. TEPCO said it would be significantly diluted in the ocean. Wait a second. They said it was all in the tanks. TEPCO's still struggling to keep their head above the contaminated water at Fukushima. This is an eye-opener for you. And as the water samples taken from a cable trench contain levels of radiation comparable to those seen in the first week of the disaster. Well, you never see nothing because you had to run away. The laboratory test has showed that over 8.7 billion becquerels of tritium, 2.35 billion becquerels of cesium, 2.35 billion, 750 million becquerels of other radioactive material in each liter of contaminated water. Look, if you got 8.7 or 2.3 billion becquerels of cesium, you're not going to find the tritium. Not only that, you can't get close to it. That's a lethal dose just standing alongside of it. So they tested like a cubic centimeter and then scaled it up. And of course, they're not going to tell you the whole truth, so it's infinitely worse than that already. 5,000 tons of the contaminated water were captured and leaking out of this one cable trench, pre-meeting the soil and leaking into the ocean. It doesn't. Every time you hear the word leaking, you just want to strangle somebody. Like, does that look like it's leaking to anybody? That's the remains of Reactor 3 ejected the reactor core and the fuel pools into the environment. You really think all of that ends up in a tank? Well, 5,000 tons times 1,000 is 5 million. It's 1,000 liters. That's 5 million liters. So 5 million liters times these numbers is what they're talking about. Enough to make everybody on the planet sick. Because radiation attacks everything, destroys everything with replicating cells, no matter how small or big it is. In case one hasn't paid attention, the constant stream of international experts who called for TEPCO to be removed as the organization in charge of decommissioning, they're not. It should have been the people who built it. Radioactive particles on the seafloor at 1,000 times the normal levels 20 kilometers from Fukushima. I thought you said it was all in the tanks. TEPCO begins work on the underground ice wall. Enormous amount of cooling water is injected around the clock. Enormous amounts. Not 150 ton or 300 ton, but enormous amounts. And the molten fuel from overheating is leaking from the damage. Like, if you put an enormous amount of water and it's not leaking, it's hemorrhaging. Because you got to fill up at some point, don't it? Reactor containment building mixing with groundwater, and reactor building turbine buildings and various underground tunnels before seeping. See, they use the word leaking and seeping. It does look like it's leaking and seeping to anybody on this planet. Is anybody that gullible? Does that look like it's leaking and seeping to you? Does that look like it's leaking and seeping? Does it look like it all in the tanks? Does it? You really think it's all in the tanks? Ambassador Kennedy tours Fukushima Daiichi Reactor 4. Look at her. Here we are at Reactor 4. That's a fucking miracle, because it looks like that. The fuel pools will be at the top. She has to be way above it to look down. Like these clowns, like these scum degenerate traitors, human trash done. Human embryos in the U.S. likely bioaccumulating radioactive iodine, cesium, and strontium. And it never stops. It's not in the tanks. It's in you and your loved ones and your friends and your families. Dozens of miles of dead squid wash ashore in California. Researchers have no idea why. No, they're not allowed to say Fukushima. 12 miles of dead squid. You got any idea how many pilot whales that would feed? No, it's all totally in the tanks, Dana. It's true, 70% of Japan's territory is polluted. Tokyo is contaminated with highly toxic radioactive material. No, it's not. It's all in the tanks. La 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 la. Work at Fukushima plant to go on for 10,000 years. Longer than human history. No, it's all in the tanks. Nothing to worry about. People on the West Coast might be concerned about the Fukushima plume. Lots of radioactivity flowing into the ocean. Government's not testing the fish. I thought it was all in the tanks, Dana. Yeah, because media hates your guts. TEPCO investigates radiation levels of exhaust stack. The exhaust stack, far away from the reactors, by the way, all things considered. You can see the reactor, see the exhaust stack? The exhaust stacks are 25 sieverts per hour. But they're inside the reactor with Kennedy getting the fuel out. Just don't go near the exhaust stacks. They're pretty hot. When the man in front of you drops the fuel rod, pick it up and run. Scientists warn of a new flood of radioactive particles around Fukushima. Those who escaped the initial fallout could be exposed. People in coastal areas are particular risk. No, they're not dead. It's all in the tanks. Everything's totally cool. Die-offs of mammals, birds, reptiles in western United States. So many diseases afflicting such a wide variety of animals. Names out of a science fiction thriller. Hemorrhagic diseases, Slovakian plague. No worries. Not Fukushima. It's all in the tanks, Dana. It can't be Fukushima. Nuclear professor, worry about what they're doing at Fukushima, and there's good reasons. One mistake and from disaster. The government has lost the public trust. I don't believe them either. Another quake to be the final blow. They have a lot of quakes, folks. These are fragile, brittle buildings. No, it's all in the tanks. It's not. Now, we've done the research. We've done it from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska, year after year after year after year, 4 to 5 months a year at a time. Me, by myself, with those 3 boats for some of it. And those species, you'll never take that picture again. Right? Do you get it? That's what it looks like. These are before and after pictures. The whole coastline is stripped. Went back year after year, the species didn't come back. That means we killed the ocean. But a lot of species are, because they can survive for extra periods of time. But you're seeing all these emaciated whales, emaciated gray whales. You got mortality events for gray whales, mortality events for humpback whales, mortality events for beak whales, mortality events for quite a few species, not just whales, by the way. This is an extinction event. You'll never take those pictures again. Is it worth losing all of these species permanently so we can have shitty fucking nuclear power on your planet? I know the answer. Don't bother answering it. It's permanently exterminated. We went back year after year. The species never recovered. Is it worth it to lose all those species? Because that's what happened. Is the cover-up worth that? Do they have a right to cover that up? Is that a fucking crime or not? Because I've been screaming for a decade. This is a typical day for me. And my wonderful sidekick, bless her heart. And this is the typical end of a day for me. You're in a tropical rainforest, so it's typically miserable. It's really nice. That night in particular, I got caught in a hurricane, washed up on the rocks 3 o'clock in the morning, done thousands and thousands of dollars worth of damage. It took me 6 days to limp into port. It took me a week and a half to get the whole fleet back up and running again and get back out on the ground. It just brings me nightmares every time I see that. 28% of the polar bears with skin lesions, hair loss, thyroids tested by the government, like symptoms in seals and walruses. A couple of years ago, we had a die-off down here. I went up and all the thyroids were cut out of the pilot whales. They were on the beaches alongside the road in this little community for 36 days, and the media didn't report it. The children wouldn't go to school because they didn't want to drive past all the dead whales each day. I went up there and they mobbed me because finally somebody was paying attention. And I told him the truth. It's not in the tanks. Colonists, the truth must be told. Fukushima is a major global threat to all living flora and fauna. No, it's totally all in the tanks, Dana. Magazine, the Fukushima crisis comes to the United States. Professor, new and improved version of the original atomic plague is spreading, and that the truth is so incomprehensible, it's easier to pretend it doesn't exist. It's easier to pretend that it doesn't exist. No, totally all in the tanks, Dana. Japanese government criticizes TEPCO's poor management. And he got elected prime minister later, didn't he? Just sugar. TEPCO releases video of groundwater entering the crippled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant at 2.2 sieverts per liter. If you put that in the tanks, you're never getting on the site again. And that's what you expect, at least. Not only talking about beta, that's what you expect. You know, so 2 liters is a lethal dose. Just walking past it. It'll take you a couple of weeks, but you'll die from it. And Fukushima worker wanted to escape from the nuclear plant, but feared he might hurt me. Mom, nuclear scientists were afraid to escape from the nuclear plant. No, son, that's the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. Nuclear scientists don't go to Fukushima. Sardine population plummeted along the U.S. West Coast. Collapse of species feared. Gee, what species eats sardines, Dana? Well, just about all migratory marine mammals. Birds in particular. Anchovies and squid and sardines, they all collapsed. Herring, capelin, I mean, it takes a while for it to completely collapse, but so you don't really notice it because it happens in increments over a decade or two. But after about a decade, you can't deny it any longer. Top scientist, which is David Suzuki, said, Fukushima is the most terrifying situation I can imagine. I've seen a paper which says it's bye-bye Japan, evacuate the North American West Coast if Unit 4 goes after the quake and the rods are fully exposed. Well, like this? Because when he said it, that's what it actually looked like. You should have evacuated the Northern Hemisphere and Japan. No. Everything's in the tanks, Dana. Plutonium having melted and dropped somewhere is suspected to be causing contamination in the underground water at Fukushima. Plutonium was 18,000 pounds per building was lost. There's 4 buildings lost. Plague of radioactive water from Fukushima will need monitoring for the next 100 years or even longer. Why tritium at 200,000 becquerels a liter. Wow. And you don't really hear about that one very much. That's a terrible isotope. And that's a huge number, by the way. And that's part of the equation, because if it's in that liter, it's going to be in the other liters. After we left Japan, it felt like the ocean itself was dead. This was a sailor who raced $1 million yachts all his life, and all of a sudden there was no species anymore. And the media picked up the story and didn't mention Fukushima a single time. Not accidental, because the industry bought up all the media. Everything's in the tanks, they said, and that's the biggest lie in human history right now. Concern about rain on the West Coast. Concern. You have no concept of what occurred, how bad the rain actually was and for how long. Biologists find pink salmon that are canary yellow on the Pacific coast. Insides are yellow, heart parts, gills, arches, spines, cartilages in the head. Spleens are swollen, livers are spotted, some with bugged out eyes. They've never seen nothing like it. This was Canadian Fisheries and Oceans. Fukushima is alive and well for the thousands of years because we're not trying to come up with solutions. If we got all our universities to come up with a solution, we'd actually come up with a solution. If we send nuclear scientists there, they come up with a solution because they wouldn't want to die. So they would come up with solutions. Complete collapse of the sardine populations. No, it's totally all in the tanks, Dana. Doctor warns about radioactive substance from Fukushima coming to the west coast. Consider keeping women and children away from the coastlines and the beaches. Think of that statement. No, it's totally in the tanks, Dana. Nothing got out into the ocean. I double guarantee you. No concern about radiation levels in the Fish Pacific. The numbers are staggering. It's a major event worldwide. Imagine just a single site can destroy the entire planet, because it did. It happened. It's happening. And pretending that they're going to release the tanks in the future is not going to help the population and the species of the future and present. We have to fight with everything we got and come up with solutions, not deceptions and deceit and dishonesty. The official data is all denial. Right? Pretending it's in the tanks is a ludicrous assertion. Leaked Godzilla trailer hit the webs, features the voice of nuclear pioneer. Now I've become death, the destroyer of worlds. Oppenheimer.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Now we got Fukushima is way worse. Post-Fukushima horror. Severe impact to the oceanic environment, unpredictable amount of damage. Not just the Pacific, but all oceans. And your lakes, and your streams, and your rivers, and your glaciers. An unpredictable amount of damage. And I've done the research I showed you earlier. It's not damage, it's destruction. It's a complete annihilation. Decimation. It's not in the tanks. And why are they always pointing and never doing work? Official blast Japan's government over Fukushima. Such immoral people that they let the radioactive substances flow out freely and said nothing while contaminating the ocean. It's absurd. And now they're trying to cover the whole thing up by pretending it's in tanks. TEPCO admits not working on plan to stop Fukushima radioactive. Every time you hear the word leak, you've had a nuclear scientist alongside you can punch, it'd be perfect, right? Declare a state of emergency right away and intervene at Fukushima, says lawmaker. Issue a SOS now. It's really an emergency. Government is utterly lost and international help is needed. Exactly. And because you didn't do the right thing, now the cover story is idiot tanks. They had 1,000 tanks in 2013 and 1,000 tanks in 2023. How many tanks did you build in the last 10 years? None. You can fill up all the tanks 6 times a day under a normal reactor. Single one. Radioactive water is pouring out every day and headed our way. TEPCO researchers says it's impossible to contain the radioactive wastewater leaking from Fukushima. It's not leaking, it's hemorrhaging. It's flowing. Japan's government lost all credibility. The nuclear industry lost all credibility. Melted fuel is exiting Fukushima site. A very effective way of it being dispersed to humans far away. It's beyond man's control. And the industry's out there trying to convince you it's in tanks. They're walking around with their paper suits and plastic bags in their hands. Never a tear, never no dirt on it. Professor, Fukushima disaster is beyond a cover-up. The Japanese government thinks they can get away with tricking the masses about the extent of the problem. The research that I've done, how can you deny that? How can I not worry the fuck out of you, man? How does that actually work? There was a melt through, so Fukushima fuel is definitely down the groundwater and is flown into the Pacific. May already be on the west coast. Of course it is. The tanks, again, we're almost through this. The tanks were built as a distraction. Cracked floors in Fukushima reactors can no longer be stopped from getting into the ocean. I thought it was all in the tanks. Fuel material introduced to the Pacific Ocean via drains at the Fukushima. No, it's the buildings are completely destroyed and hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. It's not just drains. It's absurd to suggest that it's the drains. It's absurd. Devastating impact to come. It's already here. Japan experts says radiation levels in the ocean too high to be explained by groundwater. Must be coming from other contaminated sources. Now, it ain't the tanks. Chairman of the Oregon Republican Party suggests dropping nuclear waste from airplanes for its health benefits. Wants to put radioactive material from San Onofre into the drinking water. Try wrapping your mind around that statement that there's a human like that. Art Robinson wants to sprinkle radioactive waste from airplanes to build up our resistance to degenerative illnesses. Should have been shot right on sight the next time somebody's seen that piece of shit. Unknown where Fukushima nuclear fuel went, even if found, they don't know how to get it out. The Wall Street Journal. TV, public concern over Japan's fish imports to South Korea looks to be justified. Over £6 million found since 3/11 in South Korea. And South Korea knows what's going on. They're helping with the cover story. It's all in the tanks, Dana. Trenches connected to Unit 2 is what's contaminating the groundwater. Unit 2. That's Unit 2 right there. You sure it's not Unit 4? Or Unit 3? Well, Unit 2 is, for sure, but how can you point at Unit 2 when you can point at that? Put a picture of that there and say, look, it's all destroyed. Who's going to argue with you? Over 3 billion becquerels a liter of radioactive substances flowing from the building each day. No, it's totally in the tanks. We're almost through this. U.S. West Coast to be hard hit by Fukushima ocean contamination. North Pacific Gyre transporting radioactive materials to North America. There's another caveat to that story. Sometimes it takes me a little while. Today happens to be one of those days. Here we go. Which one is the plutonium? Here's a model from TEPCO, the plutonium. There's like 20 days of radioactive fallout. The plutonium-239, by the way. That's one of the worst of the radioactive isotopes you can get. It's the plutonium in the plutonium daughters. And Neptunium-239 decays to plutonium shortly within 47 days or something. And that's a model of the plutonium. Neptunium-247, 239 dispersal. No, it's totally in the tanks. That's such an important model, by the way. I'll put both of them back up there for you. So, is it in the tanks, or is it covering the entire planet? These are TEPCO's numbers that were modeled, by the way. Fukushima contamination ocean reached Alaska in under a month. Well, this was NOAA's ocean dispersal model. that was hid away for several years, then finally got leaked online, and then was confirmed to be real. I thought it was all in the tanks. No, that's just the evil nuclear industry said that. Fukushima ocean plume hit Canada 6 months ago, preceded model predictions by several years. It hit Canada in about 14 days. The entire country was covered. Right, because they want you to think it's only the ocean, then they want you to think it's all in the tanks. Cesium in the sea likely to return to Japan in 20, 30 years. Again, that was meant to manipulate you. What about uranium? What about plutonium? What about americium? What about neptunium? What about the strontiums? What about thousands of fission products? Not in the tanks, it's in you and me and your loved ones and your friends and your families and all the birds and mammals and animals and insects and everything precious, everything that makes the world worth living in. See him standing under steel plates by the tanks, doing nothing, walking around, looking at the cameras, everybody trying to walk in a different direction, doing nothing, nobody with tools. Doesn't look suspicious at all, does it? It's not in the tanks, it's in everybody and everything, and your bushes and your plants and your trees and your flowers and your bees, and all the precious, wonderful is being destroyed because the world sits in silence, and now they got you complacent. Try walking with both of your heels on the ground. See how that works for you. It doesn't. Well, we got a couple of little videos to play here. Might get some music, get some hip music for that. There's no hip music. Put that on the big screen. That's we got. I can't believe how big the cabinet actually is. It's wow. It's just such a. All right, we got home. This is today. We got what we went for. I got a spot cleared out. I'm gonna get it up against that wall. I'm gonna get it up against that wall. I gotta go get the broom, I guess, clean that out. And that's 2 rails to get it inside. It's 130 pounds. I'm not sure how that's gonna work. Let's get her done anyway. Alright, so we got the back is almost screwed on. The top, bottom, sides on. We got the door and the shelves to go after. We got to stand this up in a minute. We being me. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's massive, man. Holy, I didn't realize it was going to be that big. I know it was supposed to be pretty big, but just tons and just unbelievable amount of room. And once I organize everything, it'll be a lot better, but amazing. This is fun. Get all my tools in one place and get everything organized. It'll take a couple of days. Yeah, that's life-changing to get that piece of equipment. I'm really amazed at how well that is working out. And gets rid of all the clutter too. When I get all my tools in one spot and everything's always going to be at my fingertips. Something I should have done it obviously a few years ago. We didn't. And now we're done. And so I was going to buy a cabinet to go underneath the toolbox because to store all the tools. But then I realized that this was a better application, right? And so I'm unbelievably grateful that we ended up making the right decision. And we got a going to close the poll down. Here, let's check the poll one more time tonight. Yeah, no, it was totally amazing how well that worked out. Has Japan already poisoned the entire Pacific Ocean with Fukushima's constant radioactive emissions? And this is a resounding 95%. Like, if you watch 2 minutes of the video, you're going to realize the only answer is yes. Right? If you watch 2 minutes of the video, there's no other answer. So we're going to end that poll on that happy note. How did we do tonight? Well, we got through it. It took 4 hours to put the cabinet together. And that left me, what was it, up at 4 p.m. by the time I finally got up this morning, went down, picked it up. Time I finally got it home, cleaned everything out of the way, and then started to put it together. When I finished, it was 4 p.m. in the afternoon. So then I started working on the tank show for tonight, and I started my show at 10 p.m. And it took me 2.5 hours to tell the story, and it took a lot longer than that to put it together. It was a very long day. Awesome day. I'm really happy with the show tonight, because anybody that's trying to understand the Fukushima tanks are in for education. And so sending hugs for everybody. I'm exhausted. I almost gave up about a half an hour ago, and I was like, well, what's the point of doing all the work if you're going to turn that down? What's the point of doing all that work if you're going to give up? So 65 votes. We're going to end the poll. I forgot. Ending poll, sir. Good night, everybody. Thank you, everybody. I'll read the comments after. I can probably do a shout out while I'm here, I suppose. Albert, Jester, John Shiflett, Dana Nasana. Hi, Dana. 2023 Monolith. Thanks, James. I love it. Blue Jay. Good night, everybody. Now, Chelsea called in. Hugs for Chelsea. I know I seen Colette there earlier. S. Hi, Colette. Hugs for you, honey. The Invisible Rabbit. Albert. Good night, everybody. Enjoy your weekend if that's possible. I'll be back on Sunday. Savannah's 4th. Fast Thinker. Should be wearing my glasses trying to do this, because it's on the small screen instead of the big screen. Small screen's a little harder because it's fairly far away. And I gotta squint my eyes. Randy, good night, everybody. I'm just doing a quick shout out to everybody I can find on the first route. Adam the Mushroom Messiah. And everybody that's sitting back home or watching this later. Hi, everybody. Hugs for all of you too, of course. And I know everybody can't find the show. Stephen Young donated $50 last night, which brought us up to the money we needed to cover all the expenses. So that was amazing timing. Thank you, Stephen. Hope you're feeling a bit better. Stephen suffered a terrible health issue a couple of years ago, and he's slowly crawling back. Never lost his passion, you know. With all the health problems he had, he still had passion for reality, for Fukushima and radiation. John Curtis, good night, everybody. Almost through it. And of course, Kevin Marble. Looks good. Looks like I got everybody at the top part. Down to the most recent comments. I missed anybody, my apologies. Danny-san. Yeah, good night, Dana. John Shiflett. Yeah, love you too, bro. Thank you. Yeah, no, it was a good show tonight. If you're new to this subject, you just got an eye-opener, and it'll change your life because you'll be able to make informed decisions from here on out. You're not going to be hoodwinked by the horrific scumbag that is the nuclear industry. And that means you just had a great day. It's hard news. It's better to know the truth than to be deceived by the lie. Hugs for everybody. God bless everybody. We'll see everybody on Sunday night or Sunday afternoon. It's hard to say with me. Have a great day. Tomorrow, a great weekend. We'll see everybody in a couple of days. Take care now.